Hey guys, Shane Watson from SilverLadder.com here. I wanted to do a video that hopefully ends up being mercifully brief, yet long enough to have enough important information in it on a very important topic. September is National Suicide Prevention Month, a month dedicated to awareness of suicide prevention and intervention. So obviously, first and foremost, I want to start out with this. If anybody watching this video is dealing with thoughts or feelings of suicide, tell someone immediately. Tell a trusted, caring, non-judgmental, available person. It is so important that you understand that you are not alone in what you are dealing with and that you don't try to fight that battle by yourself. Now, when I say you're not alone, that has become such an empty platitude that gets thrown around so much. It's on bumper stickers, it's in greeting cards. But I can say that with certainty that you are not alone. As someone who felt very alone myself and went through those dark places, I know what that's like, but I can also verify firsthand there are people who can empathize with how you're feeling and who care about how you're feeling. I'm one of them. So if you don't have someone in your life to talk to, or you feel like you can't open up to anybody that you know personally, I want to give you a couple resources that are really important. 988. 988 is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's 24/7, 365. It's free and it's anonymous. The individuals who will be answering the phone will know how to have that important conversation with you. However, if you feel like you're not even ready yet to talk about it out loud, it's hard to say those words, you can text 741-741. Type the word, text the word HOME, HOME, to 741-741. That is the crisis text line. Whether it is somebody you know in person, whether it is the crisis text line, the suicide and mental health lifeline, whatever it is, please do not fight your battles alone. I was there. Over a decade ago, I was struggling significantly, dealing with substance use issues and eventually suicidal thoughts and eventually a suicide attempt. Life can get better. It can change for the better. And again, that's not another empty platitude. People say that a lot with no substance behind it. I can put substance behind it. I have lost count of how many people I've seen whose lives were in very dark places, whose lives then ended up turning around. I'm a prime example. Not even 1 year later after my suicide attempt and after my arrest, my life was 180 degrees from where it had been prior to that. However, to the rest of you out there, those of you who may not be dealing with your own thoughts or feelings of suicide, it is important that we realize, while we encourage people, as I just have, to speak up, to ask for help, to start that conversation, we may need to be the ones to begin that conversation. A lot of times, someone who is having thoughts or feelings of suicide is overwhelmed with those emotions and those thoughts. They don't know how to begin that conversation. It's really intimidating. They don't know how they're going to be received. They don't know if they're going to be judged or taken seriously. So we often have to be the ones to start that conversation with them. And in order to start that conversation, we need to have the level of awareness to recognize that we need to start that conversation. We need to know what to look for to recognize that someone may be having thoughts or feelings of suicide. And it's important to understand what it is that we're looking for. First and foremost, I'm going to simplify it as changes. We are looking for changes in behavior. Something outside of the norm for that person. Change in sleeping habits, eating habits, change in just their overall appearance, their hygiene, whether or not they're taking care of themselves. Changes in interest levels in the things that they typically care about and spend time in and have passion about. Disconnection from the people they normally love to be around. Disconnection from the things they normally love to do. And there's 4 categories to keep in mind, to keep an eye out for, to look for, and to listen for. Number 1 is overt statements regarding suicide. Statements like, I want to die, I want to kill myself. Those are not as common as we may think they are. What tends to happen a lot more frequently is the second category I'm going to tell you about, covert statements about suicide. No direct references to death or dying, but phrases like, I just can't handle life anymore. I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up. I wish I was never born. I'm so done with everything. You see that there's no direct mention of death or suicide there, but you can see where that can absolutely be pointing in that direction. And we need to ask that person in order to clarify, what do you mean by that? Or it's even okay to say to them, sometimes when people say things like that, they're thinking about suicide. Is that what you're thinking about right now? Not only is it okay for us to ask that question, we need to ask that question. We are not going to plant that idea in their head. One of the biggest myths, the biggest fears that people have about intervening in suicide or preventing is that if they ask if someone's suicidal, they're going to give them the idea. It is not true. Research has proven time and time again, it is not true. So we have overt statements, we have covert statements. Number 3, behavioral signs. Signs that someone may be thinking about suicide or even planning it. Giving away possessions, because if you think you're going to end your life, the things you own don't matter so much anymore. No longer completing tasks, no longer going to work or completing tasks around the home or taking care of hygiene, as I said earlier. Writing letters or texts or emails or direct messages that sound like they could be goodbye messages. Someone who is not normally very affectionate, suddenly getting really affectionate with those around them. Lots of hugs and kisses as if they're saying their final goodbyes. And one that can be very surprising, somebody who suddenly gets really happy. Because if you have been depressed and struggling with the weight of everything that's added up, that has led you to thoughts and feelings or a plan of suicide, sometimes for people who have been in that state, when they make the decision that they're going to move forward with that attempt, it almost feels like a sense of relief, and sometimes they can switch out of months-long depression into a suddenly happy mood. And the fourth and final category to be aware of is situations that can increase the likelihood that someone will consider or attempt suicide. The death of a loved one, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a child. Loss of a job, financial struggles, significant health issues, prolonged illness, terminal illness, someone who has been in a violent or neglectful or abusive relationship. Those situations can add up. And if you are thinking about someone right now, after you've heard me mention all this stuff, and you're thinking about, wow, they've been through some of those situations. They've said some of those kind of things. They've displayed some of those kind of behaviors. That person may be at risk for suicide. It's so important to begin a conversation with them and explain to them what it is that you saw. If it makes you feel more comfortable explaining why you're asking if they're suicidal, it's okay to do so. A lot of times people like to list off what they've seen. Hey, I noticed that, your sister died and you've really been having a hard time with that. And then you lost your job. And I know that you've been dealing with that sickness, that illness for several months now. And I've noticed that you quit coming to our get-togethers that we typically have. You look different. You look like you're really tired. And you said some things that caught my attention. Sometimes when people go through what you've gone through, they say what you've said, and they show some of the signs that you've shown, they can be thinking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? And just the mere fact that you care enough to take the time to begin that conversation, to ask those questions, to show that you care enough to pay attention, to have picked up on those things, that in and of itself can lift a great deal of weight off of the shoulders of that person that you're talking to, that you're asking. Begin that conversation. Start that conversation with someone if you see that they're struggling. If you don't know what to do from there, you can call the Suicide and Mental Health Lifeline 988 together, and they can then walk through the rest of that intervention. Get that person connected to professional help. Get them connected to therapy or counseling or support meetings. Help them find healthy coping skills. Help them find things that let them deal with the stress that they've been dealing with. And if they have lived through trauma, I'm going to go back to that counseling and therapy. Having a trained professional who knows how to deal with that, walk them through that process, unpack that, and begin to heal that is absolutely crucial. You do not need to be a credentialed professional to intervene or prevent a suicide. You don't have to have doctor before your name or PhD after your name. What you need to have is a level of awareness and a good amount of willingness. I've given you some of the awareness. I hope you have the willingness. September is Suicide Prevention Month. Hopefully this information was helpful to you. Shane Watson, silverladder.com.